Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears All right, let's start that over. I don't know why I just had a stroke right there. Jeez. 3, 2, 1. Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat the Designer, Courtney Cronin back for another Tuesday edition, and we got to take a deep dive into this offense. I mean, listen, it's nice to have the defense. It's nice to have the takeaways. It's nice to be in these games, but at the end of the day, that is not what we were sold on heading into this season. We got to take a look at some of the problems that we continue to see pop up, and is there any fix for it at this point early in the season? We'll break down offensive line. We'll look at play calling. We're going to also take a look at this running back room a little bit. I've got some questions on that as well. $8 million worth of questions, to be factual. All that and more on today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave the 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Courtney, what's going on?
Not much. Just trying to dissect the last 24, 48 hours of how are they in this spot right now? Because you're right. Like, nobody expected it to look this bad. Like, there were expectations of learning curves and growing pains, but kind of looking back at everything and wondering, all right, well, they've got the Colts this week. Colts are coming off a loss, but the Texans created a blueprint that if other teams want to follow that, if the Bears don't come up with any sort of workaround, like, that's a very obvious but very realistic way to beat a rookie quarterback when you send as much pressure as they did. And, people talk about the blitz. Like, it really wasn't they were sending like 7 or 8. They're sending 5 most times. And, the free rushers coming at Caleb Williams, there was a lot to unpack just from how poorly the scheme was blocked up to protect Caleb, but also like what the workarounds are, knowing that this is not sustainable. Like, he's not going to be the Bears quarterback by week 7 because he's going to be injured, unfortunately, if this he can't get hit at this rate. They learned their lesson from Justin Fields. That is one thing that you absolutely have to apply to fix to make sure that Caleb Williams doesn't get off to the worst possible start for a rookie by, getting hit out of playing games.
See, and the only thing I would push back on what you just said is that they learned their lesson from Justin Fields, because no matter what you thought of Justin Fields as a quarterback, when you look at every single quarterback around the league, one thing is true. Take a look at what happened up in Minnesota. If you put an offensive line in front of Sam Darnold, who, let's be real, his NFL career has been gross. But if you put an offensive line in front of him and give him Justin Jefferson, he can look like a very competent quarterback out there. And that's not what the Bears have done here for Caleb Williams. So much so, in 2 games now, he's been sacked 9 times. In totality, these numbers per PFF, 42 pressures have been allowed. On 66 dropbacks, he's been pressured 48% of the time. And so my question with all of this is, not only did you not learn your lesson, but how much rope are you going to give this group put together? Because there's listen, this week, everybody played poorly, but there are 2 obvious question marks that we have in the middle, and one in Nate Davis, who, I mean, yet again, you just watch back the tape and you go, how are you blocking nobody out here?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, the reason they learned from Justin Fields was because, and I know there are a lot of people out there in my mentions and just puffing their chest out, the people who wanted the Bears to stick with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. The upgrade in quarterback was a non-negotiable. And if you think otherwise, then you can't have a conversation with somebody like that. You just won't get, it won't be a reasonable conversation. But they did see how often he got hit and what happened the last 2 seasons to know that spooks a young quarterback, that ruins a young quarterback. So they do know that. Obviously, it's not playing out any differently through 2 games, so they better fix it really quick. Otherwise, he's going to be in a worse situation than maybe even Justin was, because Justin got to sit for a couple of games before he had to play. This is it's interesting that this is happening now, the same week that Bryce Young gets benched, last year's number 1 overall pick in Carolina. And that's I go back to, there's a lot of revisionist history going on as people are talking about the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams and all, there's a lot of angles that people are taking. when everybody from a national perspective, people who just like decided to negate the offensive line, saying this is the best situation a rookie quarterback's ever been in. Look at the defense. Look at DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Romadunze. Look at the tight ends. Look at the running backs. Why did nobody outside of Chicago point out, hey, this offensive line was suspect the last 2 years. This offensive line has not had these sort of additions. Yeah, they spent a top 10 pick on Darnell Wright, but that's one top 10 pick in an entire
Yeah.
offensive line. Like, I thought Bill Belichick on the McAfee show pointed it out kind of perfectly. And it's not that he's a Caleb Williams hater or what he said during I think it was the Inside the NFL show before,
The flashes, yeah.
the flashes. And he's like, well, he wasn't very accurate. Like, what am I supposed to take from this? Like, it's not that he's being a hater on that. I really, truly think that the way that he played it out is kind of a wake up call to, Bears coaches, the Bears front office. And I know that we've said this before. Like, Detroit has given the league a masterclass on how to build an offensive line, starting with Taylor Decker to Frank Ragnow to Penei Sewell.
Yeah.
Like, if you really want to do this right, and I understand not every franchise has the time to get it down. I mean, that's 2 front offices that put that offensive line together. The current one and the Bob Quinn one. In Matt Patricia and that whole last staff that was in Detroit before Terry Fontenot and Dan Campbell got there. Like, but that's how you have to do it if you really want to make an investment in the health of your offensive line and health of your offense, because those guys, if they're good, high first round picks, those guys last 10 years. And frankly, I thought back to when Ryan Poles talked about how good he felt about the depth of this offensive line. And that was August 28th. That was only a couple of weeks ago. But then when he went through each of his offensive linemen and Braxton Jones is improving, Tevin's playing his best ball. They spent a top 10 pick on Darnell Wright. Coleman Shelton's the quote unquote glue guy. They really like the versatility with Ryan Bates. And then Nate Davis is Nate has to be more consistent. So not really any glowing remarks there, but you just can't justify that that's a great offensive line that you feel really good about. So all of that said, when people talk about the situation that Caleb finds himself in, you can't just wish away your biggest problem. You can't wish away the offensive line. Oh, he'll be able to make up for it. Look at what he did behind, a subpar offensive line at USC. Well, he's also playing against college players there. It's a spread offense. Defenses are not the defenses you see in the NFL. So, as we try to divvy up this blame for how the offense has gotten to this point through 2 weeks, you can't really start anywhere else other than what we've seen up front. Caleb does deserve some blame for
sure.
A lot of mistakes. The inaccuracy stuff is certainly apparent, but I will say it's really difficult to throw accurate passes when you are trying to get used to the NFL speed and the rhythm when there's an offensive lineman in your lap before 3 seconds. It's tough. And I think that 2 weeks in, you have a sobering reality check at 1-1 when it could have looked a lot worse, that you are 1-1, but knowing that you don't have the luxury of, okay, I guess we just got to wait till the offseason to address this offensive line. There has to be some workarounds for it now in the way that you don't put this squarely on the quarterback's shoulders.
No, 100%. And I think that's the part to me why I do have a problem with how this offseason went, how this was done, because I like all the additions. I like all the weapons, but we kept going. When are you going to add somebody up front? Everybody in Chicago kept asking this question because you knew. And I think back to what Tevin Jenkins said, right? When he talked about, I think it was you that asked him, who's the leader of this offensive line? He immediately responds, Ryan Bates. He's the vocal leader. He's the guy who's always at the front. And he kind of was that from the very beginning. Ryan Bates was fighting just to be a backup right guard in this thing. Yeah, they wanted him to be the starting center, but he wasn't really dominating the competition there either. The injury plays into that as well. You took a chance on a backup right guard becoming the vocal leader of your team. You Lucas Patrick this thing yet again. And I know everybody's losing their mind because of the PFF numbers around Lucas Patrick this weekend.
But no, I mean, there's something to be said about that too. I think that Clint Kubiak, I mean, this is it's the chicken and egg argument.
Yeah.
that we've had now for 2 years about like, well, why isn't the offense working? Why can't the quarterback get the ball down the field? Why can't they run the ball? Like, does it start with pass protection? Does it start with play calling? Well, where does like all of those things fit in, like to the New Orleans example, why you see I think it's McCoy is like the best, of their two offensive linemen. It's like McCoy and then it's Lucas Patrick.
Yeah.
They've schemed a lot of stuff away from pressure for those guys. Like they don't have them in a straight drop back game. There's a lot of play action there because they're running the ball. Alvin
Yeah.
Kamara looks like Alvin Kamara of like, how long has he been in the league? 8 seasons. He looks like the guy like from 2017, 2018 again. And that's good. Like
Yeah.
for that offense. I think that the next couple weeks are going to be a pressure chamber for Shane Waldron to get this thing on track, to be able to scheme up just a much simpler way of life for all of these offensive players, starting with that offensive line and what they're going to be asked to do.
Yeah, it's going to be tough too, especially with how he has called plays. I saw this tweet earlier from Dan Wiederer, and he gave Caleb Williams the unofficial report card, but that's not the part that I want to focus in on here. It's the amount of passing plays listed here. 54 passing plays called, not in 2 weeks. Versus the Houston Texans alone, 54 passing plays called. These include some plays that end up going for QB sneaks, some penalties that end up getting called. So there wasn't a play on that. There was a delay of game in there as well. And of course, the passes that Caleb Williams actually threw. When you've got a quarterback who is struggling, and I understand you can't establish the run, but me and you talked with, some of the people from Seattle that got a chance to cover Shane Waldron. The knock on him was not knowing how to run the football and not being able to utilize that enough. I don't even have a problem as much with how little they've run the football, but it's the logic behind it. I don't remember the day that DeAndre Swift became a power back, and yet we keep trying to run him directly up the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're asking your quarterback to get in a straight drop back game. There's 7 dropbacks that featured play action of those 54, like of the 54 passes. And I know that like he didn't throw 54 passes, but
Yes.
like the situation, if you pared down those numbers, you're like, why do you have him in such like critical passing situations, like such critical downs from a lot of those? Why you're in 3rd and long, 3rd and 9 plus, like 9 out of 17 times.
Yeah.
You're putting way too much on your rookie quarterback. You're putting too much on the offensive line that's shown it's not capable of, when they have that crush rush, which is, Will Anderson on one side and Danielle Hunter on the other. It's as tough as it is as tough of a challenge on your ends as the first week was with Sweat and Simmons coming like ripping right through the middle of that offensive line. So I feel like that it's a jarring number to read when you think about what they're trying to do. And yes, like we don't know what their identity is, but they're trying to tell us right now that they are making a more concerted effort to throw the ball because they believe that Caleb's able to do that, but he's not able to do that without run support. When the rest of your running backs are averaging 1.6 yards per carry, like take out Caleb's numbers from Houston, when they're doing that, that's a serious issue. Like that's just like, that's not, you're basically like breaking even. Like if you take a look at like his 5 scrambles for 44 yards, and then you look at what everybody else does, it's pretty much breaking out at 0. Like, and I mean, there's some negative runs that you can factor in or like not factor in there and all that, but everything else is like 27 carries and 27 rushing yards. That's not good. But this is like, to me, the heat is on the offense. I mean, heat's on the offensive line for sure, but the heat's mostly right now on the offensive coordinator to write their way out of this, because this is not sustainable. I promise you, he will not be the quarterback. He will be injured, unfortunately, at a certain point. You never want to wish that on anybody, but you have to be realistic. He cannot get hit the way that he did. Like he can't. That's a recipe for not only injuring him, but like at some point, you start to believe what your eyes are telling you, what your body's telling you about getting hit. And there's no coming back from that after a certain point. Even if you survive through it, it's going to make you a worse quarterback having gone through it. We've never seen a quarterback who gets hit a ton and then all of a sudden come out on the other side of it like, oh, I'm so much better for that. Like they cannot continue to have him in those situations where it's a straight drop back game. And we know that, like they all know that. Like to me, the most obvious part, like anytime you see a quarterback that's great off play action and great when you roll them away from pressure, when teams like all of a sudden are like, oh, we can't do that anymore. Why? Why? Like, why do you have to abandon the run? Why can't you put yourself in a better situation where you can have the guy out on the move, whether it's on bootlegs, nakeds, whatever these things are? Just show us something other than the obvious situation that feeds right into what the defense and the pass rush is trying to do to you.
Yeah, and why are you trying to first things first, I said this yesterday, let's just bury that Gerald Everett tight end screen, whatever the heck that is. I never need to see that again. That's right up there with last year when Luke Getsy was calling the Cole Kmet under center QB sneak. Those are two plays that we can archive and just please blow those up and never put those back in a real game. That wouldn't even work on Madden. Like, it doesn't even make sense on Madden to do it. So why are we doing it in the real game? But the thing that I haven't seen that I was kind of the calling card for Shane Waldron as an offensive coordinator is that he's willing to try anything to get the job done. You want to run these power runs. You're trying all of these running backs, except the one who's probably most suited to be able to run the football up the middle. No use of Roshan Johnson. The only hit he got the entire day was getting a swipe to the face, which I don't know how that wasn't a flag. That was crazy work.
Yeah.
I love Roshan after. He's like, it took everything in my body not to thrash that dude. And I was just like, the tweet after don't hit hard when you don't do it, dog. You kind of got to let that one just
Yeah,
live.
it's he was smart not to retaliate there.
Yeah.
I don't know how Alshire didn't get flagged on that. But yeah, like, I mean, to your point, where is Roshan Johnson?
Yeah.
Where is the running back splits? Like, DeAndre Swift was 14 carries for 18
14 carries,
yards.
Khalil Herbert 2.
It's terrible. And like, it's just like in moments like, yeah, smart play call after Rome Odunze drops a touchdown in the end zone. Go with the easy out. Go run the ball in. Like, perfect play call right there, and it worked. However, why can't they scheme up some of those runs differently? I mean, we saw some of the outside zone stuff not work this time. Why? Because you have fast ends, and like, they have a defense that can compensate for that. But like, if you want to combat all of the blitz looks that they're getting, and it's not just like in passing situations, they can blitz you when you're running too. So they're not going to survive if they can't figure out a way to run the ball, because that's going to take away from making them as one dimensional as they have been. Because even Caleb Williams, as great as we think he's going to be, and as great as he's shown he was in college, he can't get around that not against this caliber of defenders. That's just like a complete non-starter unless you have a run game.
You're 2 games in now. DeAndre Swift has less than 50 yards in totality running the football. Excuse me. And listen, I understand a big part of that is the offensive line. There are times where DeAndre Swift is getting hit the second that Caleb Williams hands the football off to him to the in the backfield, right? But those runs to the outside, when he was getting them, those are the ones that you're supposed to be the special running back that you can get around that edge. And we just haven't seen that out of him in these first 2 weeks. But we also didn't see any of DeAndre Swift in preseason. So maybe he's still getting used to what the regular season looks like. As we head into week 3, though, if we see a similar performance out of Swift, is DeAndre Swift already in danger of losing the starting running back position?
I mean, that's such a like nuclear, like the worst option possible. They paid, you just said at the top of the show, like $8 million a year. He's got to start playing like it. And I mean, he knows that. I don't think that you'll find anybody who thinks that what they're doing right now is acceptable, but there's got to be a workaround for it. They are so predictable offensively that it makes it like, once you decide you want to start running the ball, it makes it, kind of a fruitless exercise. On that the first couple drives, like they had in the game, it felt like they were, efficient enough with it. Like, not clearly to like you're not getting the big chunk yardage plays that you want out of the run game, but it felt like they were at least like sustaining drives long enough with the run that, okay, you can see where this is going. Then all of a sudden,
you could utilize some play action.
Yeah, like that's 7 dropbacks. I think he was 2 for 7 on play action. It feels like they abandoned it so early, and it was a 1-score game. This wasn't a blowout, or like they're trying to get back from like, down 2 touchdowns. It was, 13-10 until they let them kick that field goal, which they probably could have taken off some more clock. Of course, the pre-snap or the penalty that was on kickoff was not great, but like, it felt like they were pressing in those moments where it's like, you guys are only down by At one point, it was 13-10. Then it's 16-10 at halftime. Like, it just, they didn't need to like sound the panic or like act panicked in that moment when it very clearly like reflected itself in what they were not willing to call after that.
Yeah, it just I the play calling has been a problem, and I understand, right? You're struggling to try and figure this out, but one of two things has to happen here, in my opinion, Courtney. Either you completely change how you're calling these plays, which I have yet to see an offensive coordinator really do. Very rarely do they go, you know what? I'm the problem.
But I
I
mean,
know.
wait one second. Like, you're right. But like, can we silver lining any of this, or at least like be like, all right, it's 2 weeks in. He now, like, Shane Waldron's seen enough to be like, all right, well, everything that like all the bad stuff that happened the first 2 weeks, like that can't happen again. That's the only reason that I'm not like completely dogging on the game plan. I do think that, on third, there were two really good third downs early on. Like, there's stuff you can pull from what you've seen the first 2 weeks. But I also think some of this is the play caller getting in a rhythm. Certainly you just wish, if you're a Bears fan, you wish that would have happened far sooner than waiting till week 3 to see if that's going to play out.
No, I agree with that. And I think that, right, like, listen, there are plays that Shane Waldron called that I'm like, Caleb Williams, you got to make that
Mhm.
throw. I understand you're under duress, but there were a couple options there, right? The
The
throwing it to Cole Kmet in the end there when he's triple covered, you got to throw a perfect ball. Now, listen,
he could have, I mean, there's
college Caleb Williams probably can make that play, but this ain't college, it's the NFL. And Roma Dunze is underneath, right, just short of the sticks. If you hit him right there, you live to fight another day. It's 2nd and 15, not 3rd and 15. You have more opportunity there. Caleb trying to make a big play, loses that one. But here's my thing. As a play caller at a certain point, you either change how you're calling plays because of the offensive line not being able to protect Caleb long enough. By the way, he's getting the ball out quickly. It's not like Justin Fields where he's holding the ball too long. He's getting the ball out the 6th quickest, I believe,
it
8th
was
quickest out of
it's
anybody.
6th for this past week. It was like 2.59, 2.6 seconds. But like through 2 weeks, it's 8th. Right,
Yeah,
right, one below Patrick Mahomes.
he's top 10 in the league at getting the ball out, so we don't have that excuse anymore. Or do we have to see changes made to this offensive line? Do we have to see things moved around? I've been somebody who said, I understand Nate Davis is making $10 million, but I just had my wisdom tooth pulled out. If it's bad, pull it out.
Mhm.
And through 2 weeks, Nate Davis has been bad.
Yeah,
Pull it
and
out.
like he's allowed more I think it's 5 pressures in 2 games. He's played 20 something less snaps than everybody else because of the rotation that they had in week 1.
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, when Tevin Jenkins was playing on the right side, he looked, that
Was
side,
dominant.
it was so good last year for the couple games that we saw him there before he had to move back to left guard. I feel like you've got to start experimenting with those things. And those are fair questions for the coaching staff. Like, Matt Pryor is their best depth piece right now. He's the only one with substantial actual NFL experience. Is Karan Amagaji ready to like start, being a factor here? Probably not. He's, still dealing with injury. He was on the injury report last week. Until he's ready to go, your other guys that you have are Bill Murray. Like,
It's not good.
no, like,
All that depth went away real
yeah,
quick.
and Ryan Poles, like, talking about that, I think really he's talking about Ryan Bates, and Ryan Bates is on IR. Like, when
Yeah.
he said that, he's like, "This depth's the best I've ever had." It's because you had Bates, who like you could plug in wherever you want, wherever you want, because he's so versatile. But now that guy's on IR for at least 4 games. Matt Pryor's, a backup for you. There's just not a lot of options right now. So I do think, of course, it's going to be a combination of, scheme up some easy throws for Caleb Williams.
Yes.
Start finding ways to run the ball more effectively, which sounds so simple in theory. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to like get him out on the move, even when the run game is like still stagnant, where it's not like, okay, we have to completely abandon play action. I just don't buy that. Not in today's like defenses can combat just about anything, but like you can still have ways to make yourself not one dimensional. Now, it's hard because we won't be able to see what they're doing behind the scenes because we're not out there at practice. But I would think that if the interior is as big of a problem as it is, and Caleb's feeling that pressure where he can't really step up in the pocket without the risk, at least in his mind, of feeling like he's about to get hit, then you might have to start moving things around. Now, is there somebody else you want to play center? Like, that's the only thing that I think is kind of a real big issue that we're not talking about is Coleman Shelton good enough to stay at that spot?
No,
I don't think so, but
he's
I
not.
don't
Yeah,
know who would you play there? Like, that's the
that
problem,
that that
like,
but
their backup
that's
center's on injured reserve.
and it really isn't a backup center,
Yeah.
right? Like that's my problem, and it's why, right? Like everybody's, I'm sure most of y'all have seen the video of me losing my mind at the offensive line situation after the game the other day. These aren't new problems. And that's why I think that this is a valid conversation to be having in week 2 for the people out there that are like, it's week 2, you guys are overreacting, you guys are panicking. This is not week 2 of having panic, excuse me, on this offensive line.
Because some
This
of the
is week 19 of having panic on this offensive line.
Well, also, I mean, think about some of the issues in the summertime, like pre-snap penalties. What did we see happen multiple times? I mean, there was, of course, the delay of game that they had coming out of a timeout. There were
Yeah.
2 false starts coming out of timeouts, one that they had called, one that Houston had called. You can't have those things, but that showed up. That's foreshadowing. Like, that showed up in the preseason. Cadence issues. And when Cole Kmet's talking about, everybody getting to the line and, you know, I asked him about this yesterday, and I want to pull up his quote so I can get
Yeah.
it verbatim, because I heard something when he was talking just about what's it called? Everybody being on the same page, and that pass protection's on everybody, because it is. Then we can get into the max protection stats, because those I think are a little damning at this moment. But when he says, where is it? I don't think it's necessarily a talent issue up front. I don't think we were necessarily getting overmatched totally physically up front, but I think us getting on the same page mentally speaking can lead into those adjustments, and we can kind of see those sacks come down a little bit. There's moments where it doesn't feel like everybody's, with the cadence, with the play call, like even Roma Dunze, just using him as an example, talking about running the wrong route the other night. I think there's more of that than players are willing to admit right now, just in terms of not everybody being on the same page, the communication issues. Like, that stuff feels like you could have alleviated that, or should have been alleviated in theory, because they're human beings and stuff is natural. Like, not everybody's gonna, it's a symphony. You have to get
Yeah.
everybody playing the same note, 11 guys playing the same note at the same time. It's not always gonna be perfect, but it to me, it just feels like there's too much of this that we saw in the preseason that keeps showing up now, and that's a problem.
No, 100%. And it's, here's where I'm at with it, right? Because you're not going to be able to fix all 5 positions right now. I don't know if you have to fix all 5 positions. I think there are certain positions that may make things worse. You mentioned a lot of stuff that we saw in the offseason and the preseason, right? That lead to the penalties and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the main things, though, is that one of the main guys you have in there, Nate Davis, just wasn't in there. Yeah, there is that symphony you speak of. It's very hard when I got the trombone player that ain't showed up to practice for the past 6 months, and now all of a sudden he wants to come in and I got all the notes down. Well, you don't have all the notes down and how we're supposed to play it, where it's supposed to be played, and things like that. And that's why, to me, you mentioned the moving of Tevin Jenkins possibly back to that right side where we saw something dominant. The questions that we have right now on this team are running the football and being able to protect Caleb Williams. Does it make your left side weaker? Yes. But we know one thing. With Darnell Wright and Tevin Jenkins leading the way, you'll be able to run the football.
At least on that
Even when
side.
teams knew, they're going right because they got these 2 road graders over there. It didn't matter because they're that good together and they're able to run the football. And yet that may take a little bit of time to even work back in on itself. But that's a situation that these guys were already in where it was like, well, we got nobody else to play right guard. Tevin, I need you to go stand over there. And they just seemed to mesh together. You had something great over there. And I would take something great on one side while dealing with a struggle on the other versus trying to just even this line out and say, well, we're going to be okay everywhere, knowing that option hasn't brewed any success to this point.
Or if you know that your offensive line is struggling as much as it is until you figure out the right combination, because who knows, maybe that takes, if they decide, this is all us just
This is
throwing this, yeah,
speculation. This ain't what's happening.
but maybe that takes a couple weeks. Why can't you bring in extra guys to block more on a more heavy basis? So here's what
Yeah.
the numbers are right now. Because they were in max protection quite a bit last year because they were getting blitzed a lot. If you have an inexperienced quarterback or a quarterback that teams don't respect to beat you with their arm, with his arm, then that's what's going to happen. So it happened with Justin Fields. So that's what's happening right now with Caleb Williams. Jane Daniels is facing the blitz a ton in Washington. That's why he's scrambling so much. But, you know, I've got the numbers here. So like they are in max protection right now at the 12% of their plays, which is the sixth highest rate in the NFL. But that doesn't change much like against the blitz. It's only 15%. So, against a standard pass rush, you feel the need to do it. Why don't you feel the need even more so when you know that when you start seeing, like, to me, that's an in-game adjustment that just didn't really happen. Like when you start seeing how effective they are at getting after your quarterback, why is that not Mercedes Lewis, Kari Blasingame, like the guys
Yeah.
that you kept on the roster for that sole purpose? Where are they in that? Because like we know they're committed to throwing the ball more. Like that's okay, but like you have to make sure that you have the enforcements and reinforcements available to you to, be in a better situation. Otherwise it's going to shake everything up. Like that's just like a no-brainer to me. Like, and I last year they tried that. Like they kept a lot of blockers on the line. 16% of dropbacks had max protection. It was third highest rate in the NFL. And then they were 30% in max protection against the blitz. I just feel like when you talk about like how do you fix this, that to me is like one place where you start. And sometimes, yeah, living in max protection takes away somebody that might be like trying to go down the field on a route and catch a pass. You could at least probably try to establish the run game a little bit better that way. At least work your way out of the rut in the simple way of doing it before you try to get complicated again and become a drop back team.
And it just feels like, like they start off the season trying to put everything on Caleb Williams' shoulders, which listen, I was okay with saying let the kid fire it up. I was not okay saying let the kid get fired on. And that's the problem where if you were able to protect him, I wouldn't have a problem with how much Caleb Williams is passing because
Mhm.
that would mean that you have the options available to you. The play's either there or it isn't. Now it's just based on can he make an accurate pass or not. But you're asking a lot of a rookie quarterback to drop back 54 times in that game on passing plays. Of course, I think only 37 of them were actual passes,
Mhm.
but you're asking a lot of that quarterback to say, we want you to put this on your shoulders. And I think that the mindset kind of seeps in when you hear that, right? Where Caleb Williams is going, I think that last pass there is Caleb Williams going, all right, we're down 9. We got to make a play.
It,
We got to
it, it
fight our
makes
way
people
back into
press
this.
naturally.
And now, okay, you're putting it on my shoulders. Well, I'm going to go do this because that's who he was in
Mhm.
college.
Yeah,
Caleb Williams is not new to this situation. I just think that, dare I say, maybe he got a little lulled to sleep by the good protection we saw in preseason because I think all of us were sitting there going, they're kind of protecting him really well. And we were not expecting this. And then all of a sudden, the real season hits and he's getting hit almost every other
well,
play in
yeah,
this.
and he can actually get hit. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Nobody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Like you can only anticipate what it's going to feel like and how to get yourself out of those situations when you're seeing it at real live speed. But for the pass to DJ at the end, like what you're talking about, just with how it felt like he did too much almost in some
Yeah.
moments. That's one thing I kind of worry about. Like, are you going to have to coach him when he's basically being told through all this, okay, all of this on your shoulders, and then like there's a game on the line moment, all of it's on his shoulders, go make a play. I don't know if he's ready for that yet with this because he's kind of reverting back to some old habits that he had to just to survive. And that's
Yeah.
coming after he had already been hit 7 times in this game. That's reality. That's like how human nature is going to work. Like, okay, if I'm afraid I'm going to get like my ribs cracked and crushed in by
Yeah.
another free rusher that's coming at me off the edge because Cole Kmet might think he was run blocking on something. The offensive line might have thought something else, which I wanted to bring it back. I found the quote I was looking for.
Okay.
So he said, there's protection adjustments. You can see pressure and you have to adjust off the pressure you see and maybe making a slide here or there, getting linemen to the right spots in that regard, or whether it's a miscommunication up front as to what play we're running. To me, that tells me that, regardless, because if you press them on it and say like, oh, well, did somebody not know? They're going to be like, oh, no, this, that, no. No, clearly that means somebody doesn't know. And there have been instances where it's like, all right, do they know what they're running? I think that it was a pretty eye-opening thing there. It's not a bad thing as long as you can get it fixed.
Yeah, no, I saw 2 instances for sure that both resulted in false starts where you could tell they didn't know where they're running. There was one I don't know if it was Nate Davis, but Nate Davis got the false start, but he's continually looking back
I think that
and
was the
looking
one on
down the
Darnell
line.
Wright, right? Or was it
They
Wright and
ended up
then
maybe they did call that one on Darnell Wright. I think they did call it on Darnell Wright, but there's just a continued look back of like, what are we okay on? What are we okay? And then all of a sudden there's a false start. You see Darnell Wright go back. You are right. That was Darnell Wright on that one. And then the other one, I want to say it was
there was one on Nate Davis too.
DeAndre Carter.
And there was one on
And
Mercedes Lewis in the red
and
zone.
Mercedes Lewis ended up getting the call, but DeAndre Carter's looking and he's trying to direct traffic and say, you need to be here. And they can't get it together. I do think that there is some of that to this where, I understand it's new, but again, we talked about the preparation of this team. It felt like this team was more prepared than we had seen. Maybe they are still a step behind than what we thought they were.
They might be. And that's, I think there's like reasons not to panic, reasons to be like, you should be further along 2 weeks in. The offense should not look like this 2 weeks in. It's okay to be looking at 2.4, 2.7 yards per play, yards per play, like period. Just being like, not great. It's okay to look at Caleb Williams and say, your average from a clean pocket, he's very efficient. He's thrown for like 247 yards and 4.8 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
He's a check down king when he's in those moments, but that's something to grow on. But there's also moments where you're like, this can't happen any longer. Like there's kinks that you're going to work through. But when it comes to like straight up protection issues and not like, making yourself self-sabotage and being one dimensional, that has to change. That's not, it's an early season rut we need to work through. No, I need to scheme something differently if I'm, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah. And essentially what you've done now, I mean, listen, I know that Caleb gets the ball out quicker, and we felt that was going to be the answer. Clearly, the Bears felt that was going to be the answer with how they addressed the offensive line. You can tell that they thought a lot of this was just, well, Justin holds the ball too long. That's why the line struggled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. This guy's getting hit just as much as Justin Fields. Heck, in this second game here, more so than what we saw Justin Fields get hit last season. And so, like, to me, the ignoring of the offensive line just because you thought that he was going to be able to deliver the football faster and that was going to fix everything. Right now, I am looking at Ryan Poles and saying, did you miss this offseason? Because we can't sit here and go, well, he didn't have an opportunity to fix this.
Yeah.
There were multiple.
Mm-hmm. Connor Williams,
in the draft, there was free agency. There were players out there in free agency that we didn't expect to be available from the interior line position. Like, I get you want to take the chance. You can't fix everything in one off season, but you're kind of in a situation where unless guys just start playing better, you can't fix it at all.
And that's a tough pill to swallow 2 weeks in, which is why I think before you get to that nuclear option, like, let's see if they can scheme some things a little differently. See if they can move guys around, see if there's a workaround to it, because there has to be. You can't continue with it the way that it is right now and expect that it's going to look any better and expect that Caleb Williams is going to make it through the season unscathed. You don't want to damage your quarterback. You don't want to do, and of course, he's in a far better situation than Carolina. No one's equating it to that, but like, you don't want to follow those same mistakes where you have a quarterback who is just, getting destroyed all the time. And Caleb has the physical gifts that Bryce Young does not, where he can get himself out of some of those jams, but you don't want him to constantly be in survival mode, do you? Like, nobody does.
That breaks a quarterback. Listen, I watched Sunday and I literally was like, this looks like when Derek Carr came in. This looks like David Carr.
Mm-hmm.
David Carr was a good quarterback. And he wasn't a generational talent as Caleb Williams has been touted by many, including our GM out of nowhere, from the top rope, shall we say. But David Carr was a good quarterback that should have been able to last in the NFL. But then you go back and you watch that first season and you go, well, no wonder he couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
He was getting his head kicked in 95% of the time. And what made me think that was even the plays that don't count as quarterback hits, even the plays that don't count as pressures on Caleb Williams, you still see guys coming in there and giving him a bump. You still see guys coming in there and letting them know, I could have got you on that one.
And you don't want guys to see ghosts. Like, when when Justin last year, I think about like right around now last year where they were in Tampa and he's hanging in the pocket for 5 seconds. You
Yeah.
remember when everybody did their film cut ups and reviews of that and being like Chase Claypool is down there, DJ Moore's right here,
Yeah.
Mooney's over here. Like I tend to think that that's a byproduct of kind of the trauma that you go through as a football player. And yeah, some people are like, well, then why would he be waiting that long and not hitting the eject button? Because you freeze. Because what you're trying to see is like that for him was seeing ghosts down
Yeah.
there, like not seeing that
It's
those
deer in the
guys were
headlight.
deer in headlights, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You don't want Caleb to be in a situation where you start guessing it's something that's not there because you're afraid of getting hit or you feel like this is going to like cause a negative play. So I've got to find something and it ends up not being there. I think that's really tough.
Yeah. No, 100%. We got to get this offense figured out. And here's the funny part about this. There are a lot of winnable games for the Chicago Bears coming up just off of the back of this defense. Like
Defense
I
kept
look at
them
our
in it
next
this last week.
I look at our next 5 games and I'm like, we probably can win 4 of these just off the fact that the defense will put the quarterbacks in such bad situations that you'll be able to score through. I think right now, Bears defense has allowed an average of 19 points per game through the 2 games. So that's a defense that's going to put you in a position to win more times than not. That's one of those situations where you can still have the issues, but you can kind of cover your eyes to them. And that's what we've done with quarterbacks in the past. That's what I don't want to see happen here, right? We're winning games. It doesn't matter. You know, hey, you got to figure it out. The quarterback's got to figure that out. But the defense is keeping us in games and they're winning games. You got to be able to get 12 points. Well, we did this with Jay Cutler. We've gone through this experiment. We did this with Mitch. We did this with Justin. We've done this experiment multiple times. At a certain point, you got to figure out, all right, if we don't figure out how to keep this quarterback alive, we're just going to be recycling through another top 12 pick. And we've done 3 of them in the last 3 QBs.
Yeah, and that's a quick way to have to it's a quick way of undoing all the goodwill that they've built up the last 48 months, more or less.
100%.
Like since this front office got here, there was a lot of good. And I do think that they have put themselves in a better position, but you can't keep ignoring your weakest link. They've tried in moments, but like there's different degrees of trying that actually solve problems. And I don't feel like they found that happy medium yet.
Yeah, they're not even. I gave a baseball analogy yesterday, and I think it's very apt for this situation. There is a difference in swinging and missing at a pitch in baseball, and you tried and you failed. What Ryan Poles has done is he's got a runner on third, and he's just watched the third strike go by multiple times. And that's what this feels like. You're not even taking real swings at the offensive line. I get Darnell Wright's one. Nate Davis isn't a swing.
Feels like they're serviceable.
You know what I mean?
Like fixes that like end up not being very good.
Yeah, I mean, you basically said we need to address a position, and so he has this letter next to his name, so that's the guy that we're going to get. Coleman Shelton isn't a fix. Coleman Shelton wasn't a fix in L.A. Ryan Bates, as much as maybe he comes in here and he's a solid right guard, he's not a fix. He's never going to be a top 5 guard in this NFL. You need fixes. You want to know why Detroit finally figured it out? All the years of Matthew Stafford getting his head kicked in, when they finally got Jared Goff, they were like, hey, what happens if we protect this guy? Is that going to like help him a little bit? Like, the offensive line is important, and I'm very shocked from an offensive lineman, not even that he hasn't assessed talent well, but that there really just hasn't been a consistent effort to get talent.
And they've prioritized other positions. That's fair to call them out on that. Like, you know, like what Belichick was saying yesterday, like they spent big draft capital and financially on receivers. They need that. They needed that to put the cupboard was bare. But then again, like it also, you know, you could put yourself in a better situation. Maybe not trying to like play revisionist history here, but maybe the DeAndre Swift thing ends up being, okay, let's go try to get an offensive lineman instead.
Well, listen, anytime
you're a running back or using what you have.
Anytime you're willing to spend $8 million on a running back, I'm going to have some issue with you. I'm sorry. I can't. And then not even like, you know, you spent $8 million and he gave you this phenomenal performance, but like he did basically what you could have asked Khalil Herbert to do, just kind of figure it out over the first 2 games. I don't know. That's a whole different conversation. We'll be here for another hour. And all you Tory Taylor fans in my mentions, you know what I mean? A lot of great punts inside the 5 that I've seen, huh? Sorry, that was a random stray. Hey, appreciate y'all for tuning in and showing love. For Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat, the designer, back at it again. Let us know your thoughts on how to fix this offense. Do you think there is a fix for this offensive line? Because I'm starting to get to the point where I'm a little bit concerned that there even is an answer this season. Let us know how you guys feel in the comments below. For Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat, the designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. One love.